Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. I'm Blake Munroe, where I'm joined each and every week by Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel. And, guys, we got a lot to talk about today. But before we get into that, I want to thank one of our sponsors today, Chinook Seedery. Be sure to check them out in your favorite store, or you can go online at chinookseedery.com. They're a staple in my household, especially with my oldest son. Always playing baseball, and I'm going and watching him. But whether I'm at the game or on the couch watching the game, I always have me a bag of Chinook. Jeff, I know you love the cinnamon toast. I'm a lemon pepper guy. Find a flavor that you love at chinookseedery.com. And let's jump right into it, guys. Texas started off last weekend really strong, swept Mississippi State, but then a little bit of a setback, a minor setback this week, losing to UTSA, but overall 3-1 since we've last talked. Gentlemen, what do y'all think?
Well, look, is it a good loss? No, but hey, that can happen on Tuesdays. Tuesdays, your midweeks, it's one of those games where you'd like to get some of your younger arms some experience. Schloss will say it all the time. You don't find a lot of freshmen that'll pitch on the weekends in the SEC. I know Dylan Volantis did. I think they'd like to get Jason Flores there at some point. But, we saw Drew Rarick and we saw, Bryce Navarre. So some of the younger guys we talked about, this is when you want to get them some innings. And, hey, it's just one of those games where your youngsters didn't have it. Your offense tried to compensate. The big thing, though, coming out of this game, he's superseding the loss. And, look, Schloss has said Dre Duplantier is fine. We'll see him in action against LSU this weekend. If everything checks out, then hey, nothing to worry about. That to me was the biggest thing coming out of that game. Anytime you pull a guy off a mound during his warm-up pitches, especially with what we've seen from Tanner Witt and some other guys in recent years, it always makes you a little bit nervous. But Blake, that's my big thing coming out of the UTSA game is the loss aside. If Dre Duplantier is fine, then I'll just chalk it up to just one of those Tuesday things that happens.
It's almost went forgotten because it happened so quick, Jeff, right? He was only on the hill for about 2 warm-up pitches before the trainer and Schloss were out on the mound. And it's like, oh, wait, you look away, you go get a hot dog, or obviously they were in commercial at the time, and you would have never expected or even known that it happened. So for that to be the case, for Schloss to say, it's not as serious as maybe expected to be pulled from just 2 warm-up pitches, that's a great sign. Big thing for me, and again, you mentioned some of those freshmen maybe hitting some speed bumps in the road, obviously, in terms of getting acclimated to the college game. Big thing for me was seeing 5 perfect innings from Cade Bing. I mean, when you talk about finding those pieces in the bullpen, if Cade Bing can be one of those, that's huge, right? Texas, we've talked about what they like to do with lefties on the hill, mixing up with some righties as they're in there as well. Cade Bing is a guy that, pitched to contact, didn't work around too many counts. He went straight after you guys and got out. So, I mean, that was a really impressive outing. And if he can continue to take that step, if he can be thrust into a Saturday or Sunday game against LSU and go get 2 or 3 innings if needed, that's a big plus for me because I'm not sure coming into the season I was expecting him to be in that conversation with the Riojas, with the Flores, Grubbs in the back end. Now he's starting to trickle in there after this outing. I think that's a great sign.
Yeah, beyond that, CJ, to get to Omaha, let alone to compete in Omaha, you really need 4 guys that you consider starting arms. And so if this is, look, I know it wasn't good early for Cade Bing, but if this is the start of him figuring it out, then this is the kind of move you'll look back at this game, even though it was a loss, and look at those 5 innings, that could make the difference for you advancing out of a regional or not, or making a run in the SEC tournament or not. So that's, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'll give you props because maybe even superseding the Dre Duplantier injury, if you got Cade Bing on the right track. And look, Blake, you talked about like this staff trusted him enough to make him the Sunday guy to open the season. Yep. So they clearly see something. Man, if you can get him on the right track, maybe you found your 4th starter.
Definitely. So guys, Texas at 17-2 now. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that they wouldn't take that. But if you would have went back to the first of the season going into this LSU series, I think I even said on our first Bases Loaded that if you're around that 14 mark, 15, best case scenario, that it would be what I would consider great going into LSU. But they've with 17 wins, I think they've exceeded my expectations. I don't know about y'all.
Remind me if, or at least enlighten me if I'm wrong here, but I believe Texas has not lost in a full 9-inning game. It's taken extra innings both games. The
Correct.
Loss against Louisville, game 1 of the year, and then obviously what we saw on Tuesday in 12 innings, that was a bit of a marathon in itself against UTSA. But again, you got to like that. To me, one thing I'm still a little bit cautious of, and I know you have to do that in terms of keeping a Riojas on the hill in a Tuesday game when you don't want to waste a lot of arms going into a big weekend matchup against LSU, but just making sure that these arms aren't overstretched is something that I've continued to monitor. I was at 56 pitches for Riojas, 53 pitches for Cody Howard, who I actually thought had a pretty solid outing, one of his better outings as a Longhorn in my eyes. That's just something. It's small in the grand scheme of things, but who knows? When you see a guy twice in a lineup as a reliever, when you kind of hit that 40 pitch mark for me is when I start to get a little wary and would like someone up in the hill ready to go at a moment's notice, at least.
Yeah, I'll back you up on that, CJ. I think you've got some roles figured out. Spencer and Harrison are your top 2 guys in the weekend rotation. You've got your top 3, I think, bullpen hands figured out with Riojas, Grubbs, and Duplantier. Volantis, really good early returns as the Sunday guy, just based on the non-con start. And then, we talked about it, man. If that game, if they didn't play Saturday and had to play 2 7-inning games with Starkville, it was going to get wacky for that third game anyway. So that's not indicative of where Dylan Volantis stands in rotation. But at least they trust him to go get high leverage out. So whether he's starting or relieving, he's a guy that's already earned the trust of the staff. Now it's about, can you just add a couple more complementary pieces? Like we talked about, if Bean can start, was the Thomas Burns we saw before Tuesday? Is that the Thomas Burns we're going to get? Or is Tuesday maybe the start of some things popping up? So just getting some bullpen roles figured out. Hey, again, I'm reinforcing a lot because now that we're in the conference play, this team's going to hit a wall at some point. It's going to happen with everybody in the SEC. It's just, Blake, to your point, my thing was, hey, rack up all the wins you can before you hit that wall. And then once you get over it, where are you at? Are you still kind of in contention to host a regional? Or are you right around that 500 mark in conference play? And then how do you respond once you clear that wall? So right now, I couldn't be happier with where this team is right now. By the way, I think it's worth noting we can get lost in batting averages. I know, and that they're kind of deceiving at times. But your top 5 guys in the order are all hitting above 300. And you got Ethan Mendoza going into this series hitting above 400. So you've got your 1 through 5. You're Blake, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say this. I think 1 through 5, you're about as potent as anybody in the league. It's just, can you get, 6 through 9? Can you get that part of your batting order sorted out?
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm with you on that one 100%. All right, guys. Well, as we do every week, let's take a look at the polls, and they continue to get a little bit closer. We got to hand it to Perfect Game. We were like, no. And then now they're pretty much dead on. But Baseball America now has the highest at number 5, Perfect Game at 6, USA Today 7, D1 Baseball 8, and Texas actually uses D1 Baseball. We get asked all the time, what's the official poll? I guess D1 Baseball is going to be considered your official one. And then the Baseball Writers, Collegiate Baseball Writers Association at number 9. But 5 through 9, we've said it week in and week out, starting to tighten up a little bit. But my question to y'all is, and I think so, to answer my own question, but do they look like a top 5, 6, 7, 8 team in the country to y'all right now?
Well, this weekend will certainly be a big test. Like, I don't know where Mississippi State will finish in the SEC, in the pecking order. I'd like to believe that Mississippi State is still a good baseball program with a lot of talent on that roster, which means that sweep in Starkville should be looked at pretty heavily. But again, I don't know 1 week into SEC play. Still, 17-2, 17-0, and without having to go into extra innings, you like that, obviously. I like where Texas is in the polls. Obviously, there are plenty of teams right now that can boast bigger wins, perhaps, some broader statistics. But right now, that 6 to 8 range, I think, is very fair for the Longhorns. And again, this is where you want to be. Stack those wins before the SEC comes, because when regionals and super regionals are given out in terms of bid sites, I mean, you'd like to have a nicer record than a team in your conference, and Texas to have done what they've done so far, right in that range where if the cutoff was today, you'd be hosting a super. That's a great sign.
Yeah, to me, it's all about conference schedule. And, we keep talking about somebody's going to win this league, right? Somebody has to come in last place in this league. So there's going to be a really good baseball team that finishes butt naked last in the SEC standings. So that's just indicative of the strength of the conference. Man, if Texas was playing a Big 12 schedule, we'd be definitely talking about this team. Hey, it's the quest to lock down a top 8. I think that would be the expectation. Conference schedule at this point is the only thing keeping me from that. But, Blake, you asked if it's a top 10 team. Yeah, I think so. And now you're in the mix. You're competing for a top 8 right now, but knowing what's ahead, I can't go there yet. But look, even though Texas lost Tuesday, Tennessee lost their midweek game to East Tennessee State. Florida State was ranked 5th in the country. They lost their midweek game to Mercer. Wake Forest was ranked 11th in the country. They lost their midweek game. Ole Miss lost now granted, Southern Miss is a good baseball team, but you still lost a midweek game to Southern Miss. So yeah, it was just one of those Tuesdays that tends to happen during the college baseball season. So I don't get lost in the sauce with the Tuesday loss. I think this team is definitely they're right now primed to compete for a top 8 seed. We'll just see after this weekend. We'll have a pretty good idea of how realistic those expectations are.
Yeah. Also worth noting, Tennessee did lose last night. Granted, to number 12 Alabama, so it's just crazy. And of course, A&M lost to Vanderbilt as well. But I mean, as you said, when we talked about it last week, Jeff, if you can finish 500 in SEC play this year, I mean, when you're looking at 12, 13 teams ranked in the top 25, I mean, that's you got to consider it a success. I mean, it doesn't seem like it when you initially hear 500, but as deep as this league is, 4 of the top 5, 8 of the top 10, I mean, you're going to have to lose at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the Aggies are thinking about 500 overall. I didn't think we'd be saying that about A&M,
Yeah.
The second weekend of conference play. And yeah, I mean, my heart just breaks that Tennessee's lost 2 games in a row. I mean, look, anytime Tony Vitello loses a baseball game, that's not going to damper my day. I can assure you of that. If anybody has a guess that's going to watch Bases Loaded, I'm not the world's biggest Tony Vitello. I did once, within an earshot of some Tennessee folks, refer to him as the Tom Herman of college baseball because I think that's how likable Tony Vitello is if you're not a Vol.
All right, guys. Well, we got to preview this LSU game here in a second. But before we get to that, or this LSU series, I should say, before we get to that, Jeff, I'm going to let you tell everyone out there about Tackle Addict.
Yes, absolutely, Blake. Are you an avid fisherman who's always looking for the best gear to take out on the lake? If you are, do yourself a favor and check out tackleaddict.com. Owned and operated by former Longhorn Brian Robinson and former Longhorn baseball great Brandon Belt. Tackle Addict has everything you need for the best in today's fishing equipment. Tackle Addict is for the everyday fisherman and serious pros alike. They get their products shipped to you directly from the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn. That's Tackle Addict, ADDICT.com. And Brian and Brandon say, hook 'em.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, guys. So this is the big storyline in college baseball, in my opinion, this weekend. Number 2, LSU traveling to Austin to play number 8, Texas. Of course, LSU has only dropped 1 game. Then we've talked about Texas 17-2. But I was asked this morning, what does Texas need to do to beat LSU? So I'm going to ask y'all the same thing. What does Texas need to do to walk away with 2 wins this weekend, or even better case, 3?
I think you mentioned it in that sentence. It's no walks for me. Make LSU earn everything. And look, LSU is a great hitting team, right? They have 6 guys in their lineup with 15 starts more with an OPS over 1, right? They have a great lineup, and Jared Jones might be in, the front runner early on as for the Golden Spikes, right? He's tremendous. 2 home runs against New Orleans on a Tuesday, one of them 450 feet. So my thing is you can't just give up free bases to LSU, a team that's going to hit for power more than not. And who knows where the wind is headed this weekend, right? That's kind of been a conversation point already this season. We've seen games where it's blown in from left field. We've seen games where it's blown straight out to left field, games where it's going straight to right? It's been all over the place. And over the last month at Boston, I have no reason to suspect that win's going to die down anytime soon. So for me, force LSU to beat you with their bats. And again, they're a great hitting team, but you can't allow guys free bases. And LSU, again, with the way that they've kind of just stacked up these big offensive performances, a lot of those have come because of errors and walks. So Texas, I know they had a pair of errors this past Tuesday. Clean it up in the field, no free bases. I know it's easier said than done, but that's one of the big points I'm looking forward to from this pitching staff coming into the weekend.
Yeah, I'll back that up and just say stick to your plan. Just continue to attack the strike zone. Look, I think you got to go into this series understanding, like you said, CJ, LSU is going to get theirs at the plate. Jay Johnson, even if you look at his Arizona teams, even before he got to LSU, those teams were really good offensively. And part of that was, hey, you play to the ballpark you're in, right? You play to your surroundings. High Corbett Field, where Arizona plays, as the spring training complex that the Indians or the Cleveland Guardians, have used for forever. It's higher altitude, so the ball can really jump out of there. So Jay Johnson kind of built his Arizona teams that way. His LSU teams, we know they can smash, and that's kind of always been LSU's MO. So, yeah, I'll go back to the Augie Garrido line. Get your outs on time. That means if you got a chance, it's a routine ground ball, and you got a chance to just ring him up at first, just do it. Don't commit errors and get extra guys on base and put pressure on your pitchers. It's already going to be pressure enough. So I think, to me, it's more about the pitchers sticking to the plan, attacking the strike zone, and defense. Back your pitchers up. Don't put more stress on them than there already is. We talk about high stress pitches in a game. You go 9 innings with LSU, you try to get 27 outs against LSU, and they're all high stress pitches. So defense, just back up your pitchers this weekend.
Yep.
Hey, and I was looking, guys. I didn't realize this until this morning, actually, talking about sticking to the plan, but plate discipline for Texas. They actually rank last in swinging percentage when it comes to that first pitch. So, I mean, they're getting a good feel for everything. And at the beginning, before the season even started, that's one thing that Schloss was preaching was, being disciplined in all aspects of the game. But you're starting to see it there. Especially, as you said, Jeff, a little bit ago with those first 5 hitters.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach because, one of the things when Tulo came on to David Pierce's staff, one of the things that he kind of changed from a mentality standpoint was to be aggressive early in counts. And, you saw Texas really attack first pitches. They're not doing that so much, and I think it's really helped you. And you can do that because look at the guys that are hitting the best right now. They're all guys that are experienced hitters. I mean, with the exception of Adrian Rodriguez, who's hitting 300 as a freshman. We've talked about kind of the freak he is. But, Galvan, Schussler's turning it around like we figured he would. Mendoza's on fire. Even if he regresses a little bit, he's still going to be hitting – in the 350s, 360s. So I'm not worried about Mendoza. Jalen Flores has figured it out. So you've got enough veteran hitters now that I think have seen enough college pitching that you can ask them, hey, take your time, identify your pitch, trust your ability to use all fields. Hey, I don't know if it's Tulo changing his approach or if this is the approach that he's wanted to use all along. But at the end of the day, the guys always when they talk about hitting, man, that's his name is the first name that comes up. And they talk about how him helping them make adjustments and the mental game. And Blake, that's what's really fascinating me about Schloss. I didn't realize Schloss was as big into the mental game as he is. He references Augie a lot and has borrowed a lot from Augie, taken a lot from Augie, and kind of spun it and made it his own. So now I just like the fact that Tulo's in a groove and, they've got it figured out. You kind of wondered, that staff works so well together at A&M, and you kind of wondered, hey, with Michael Early not coming over, and Tulo stepping into that role, hey, how would the offense handle it? I think they've handled it just fine, and I think you're just seeing it's the byproduct of veteran hitters, good veteran hitters taking a different approach.
For sure. You're talking about that attention to detail. I spoke to someone who was familiar, obviously very familiar with this staff and the last coaching staff, and I asked, what's the biggest difference? And that was the very first thing, was the attention to detail and preparation, in-game, whatever it may be. I mean, so when you said that, it sparked that in my head. But I mean, it's obviously paying dividends for Texas right now, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and that's just it's just a difference in styles. Your David Pierce tend to, as far as details go, he tend to put that more on the players to do themselves rather than it coming from the top. And it really worked, when you had a guy like Bryce Elder in that, leading the pitching group. He had a professional mentality, and we saw, he got to professional ranks and was an all-star pretty quick in his career. Ty Madden took from him, and Ty Madden took that a professional approach, and then he passed it to Pete Hansen, and then Pete Hansen passed it on down to Tristan Stevens. So it was kind of more of a player-led thing, for lack of a better term. But yeah, the fact that you can tell, man, you watch a Jim Schlossnagle practice, and CJ, we have there, it's pretty dang buttoned up. And we talk about this with football with Sark and the kind of the next step Texas needs to take under Sark. Championship teams that win championships, they're teams that do a great job paying attention to details. And I think you're seeing the early seeds of that being planted for this Texas team.
Yeah. Before we get out here, I'm going to put this graphic back up. I do have a note here. It says Spencer Friday, Harrison Saturday. But again, we're seeing that to be announced, to be determined for Sunday. I did some digging around, and it sounds like, guys, that's going to be the plan for Texas going forward. See what happens Friday and Saturday, not name a starter for Sunday, and then based on what happened those two previous games, that will determine Sunday's starter. And I was told that will be the case, for, at least in the near future, for a while.
I think part of that is just Volantis. If you need him out of the bullpen, like I said, you don't have. If you get through Friday, if let's say Friday goes extra innings, and you use Grubbs or any combination two of Grubbs, Duplantier, and Riojas, and then you're in another tight game in the late innings on Saturday, well, you're probably gonna have to use Volantis at that point. So it's probably CJ. I think it's probably maybe the only course of action they can take right now, just until they get, really. I mean, really, you hope Tuesday was the start of something for Cade Bing, because if you can just move him back into that Sunday role, it'll make the decisions on the weekend for Max Wiener streamline things a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And what's going to be interesting is that Saturday matchup against Anthony Ianson. He just struck out 15 not too long ago. So a heck of a pitcher out of the portal that LSU got. I know Texas kind of toyed around with him quite a bit, Blake. So that'll be a fun one, because, Texas would love to take two this weekend. To do that, Ianson's a guy they're going to have to get through at least once.
For sure. As long as Paul Skeens doesn't have any eligibility left, and y'all are going to tell me that Skeens is not going out on the mound for LSU, then if I'm Schloss, I'll take my chances.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Well, before we get out here, I do want to – you mentioned David Pierce, and we haven't got a chance to talk about it, but named the head coach at Rice. So congratulations to him. Been at Texas State for this up to this season, and then named middle of the season active head coach. So we'll have to see what he can do down there in Houston, fellas.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot for him. I'm happy for David Pierce. Look, baseball in the state of Texas is more fun, and Rice is competitive. And I think they've kind of slipped by the wayside the last couple of years. If Pierce is a guy that can get them back to where, they're competitive once again, I think that's great for the state, great for Texas. And it'll be fun seeing him back at the dish every now and then.
Yeah, I'm happy for Coach. I'm happy for Susan. Happy for the family that David's back in the head coaching position. Look, I don't know that Rice baseball will ever be what it was in the heyday under Wayne Graham, just because the dynamics of college sports have changed so much. Mm-hmm. But it can be a lot better than it has been. And I think Coach has a fun challenge ahead of him, because there's a lot of work from an infrastructure standpoint, from facilities. And Rice is falling way behind from where you would expect, at least us, in our age group, where we expect Rice baseball to be. I mean, you go to Reckling, the facilities aren't. You go to Texas or pretty much any other school in the state, the facilities aren't up to par. So got a lot of work ahead of him, but I think David Pierce can make Rice a really attractive destination for the next guy who takes over that program.
For sure. All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. Be sure to check us out over on ontexasfootball.com as well. Of course, we talk every sport over there, fellas. Football, especially, but basketball, baseball, softball, we got it going on. If you're a Texas fan, there's no better place to be. And right now, you can become a member using promo code OTFOG. You can lock in an annual subscription for just $49.95 as long as you use OTFOG as your promo code. And we also want to thank Tackle Addict and Chinook Seedery for sponsoring today. And we'll be back next Friday. So for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you then.